Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. So for today, what we're going to do is we're going to react and respond to the Maintenance Phase podcast. This has been sort of percolating beneath the surface of the anti-fat acceptance space. And I actually saw Nadia Nymph mention it in one of her videos. Yes, I do watch her channel. It's amazing. But also, I will say I was suggested to do this by my own audience before I even saw that on Nadia Nip's channel. So shout out to my audience. And thank you guys so much for suggesting it. I did listen to a couple episodes just to see. Gosh, my hair is crazy. Let's just pretend that I did this before I started filming. So I listened to a couple of them and it's pretty cringe. It's pretty bad. So I don't know anything about the people whatsoever. But what I do know is it's, yeah. In this one, I think the woman wrote a book. And so I guess this is to promote the book. And I just thought it would be funny because this is about myths about fat people, which I thought, why not do this? Because I am a fat person. I can respond to what they're saying and see if I agree or disagree. And I just thought it could be interesting. I'm going to be honest. We may revisit this podcast later. We may. But for now, let's get started. I don't even remember what this one is called. Let me see. This one, oh my gosh, I have nothing open. Love that. I'm sure they'll tell us. Oh my gosh, that's really ratchet. I think it's myths about fat people or something. So this is their little edgy, it's their little retro edgy intro moment.
Tagging us in, or are you tagging us in?
I'm tagging us in because it's your book.
Oh, here we go.
It's my tagline. Welcome to Maintenance Phase, the podcast that doesn't talk about myths when we talk about fat.
Okay.
I'm trying to blend your first book and your second.
See, they're not really saying the title either, for the record. So I'm at least on par. Okay.
Book.
My two
I don't know if I got
mouthfuls of titles.
19, When We Myth About Fat.
I'm Aubrey Gordon.
I'm Michael Hobbs.
If you would like to support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/maintenancephase. You can also subscribe on Apple Podcasts if that's...
Remember to subscribe to my channel and like the video, please, and leave a comment. Get that boost going. Get the algo going, y'all. I need some help over here.
Easier for you and you prefer.
Same.
You should also listen to Mike's new show, If Books Could Kill. And today, Michael, we are talking about...
Well, maybe her book will kill. You never know.
A book that I wrote.
Yeah, usually when you say that about my little podcast, I'm like, and you should pre-order Aubrey's book. But we're approaching the stage where you can just order Aubrey's book.
Yeah, we're really...
Gosh, this is cheesy.
That's a week before it comes out into the world.
If I am this cheesy on the podcast I'm doing with Lisa this summer, please let me know. Because I will probably have to tone it down a little bit if I'm at this level of cheese. This is pretty...
So if you are so inclined, you can pre-order it. For folks who are unfamiliar, pre-orders matter a great deal to the success of a given book. So if you're looking forward to a book, I would strongly recommend pre-ordering it just in general.
You guys, if Aubrey's on the New York Times bestseller list, she gets to put that in her LinkedIn bio for the rest of her life. So I'm acutely aware.
So I think it's important to also see, too, that this type of rhetoric that they do, it's very lucrative. There's a lot of money behind it. And I just want to point it out because they always point out how there's money behind dieting. Well, there's also money behind what they're doing, okay?
that poor Aubrey has spent the last month doing press for the book. So she has been asked every fucking question about it like 300 times, and she's been telling me how sick she is.
I want to react to the whole thing in full because I'm anal, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. So I will just give as a criticism, you guys, taking a bit too long to get into it. But I get that it's a podcast, but geez, give us something.
Of answering all the same questions and giving the same spiel. So I'm going to try really hard, like, not to pitch you any, like, softball questions that you've answered.
Also, what do you guys think of these retro things that they put on the video? What do you think?
A billion times. But I will say I spent the Christmas holiday reading Aubrey's book and really enjoying it, actually. I say actually as if I was like surprised, but like, no, of course.
I wonder if they're both fat or if it's just Aubrey. I don't know what they look like. I'm almost certain that Aubrey's fat, but I think I've seen a picture of Aubrey, but I wonder what the guy looks like. I don't know.
It's like, wow, her book is actually pretty good.
This lady actually knows how to string together a sentence.
But it's just a really good primer of a lot of the stuff that we talk about on the show. It's a great overview of sort of where we are on this issue. It's obviously extremely well written, extremely well researched.
Highly doubt it.
People have this idea that it's like you're just going to have to feel guilty when you read books like this, but it's actually like super fun to read, super easy, great airplane read. I don't mean that in a mean way.
I was going to say a future topic on If Books Could Kill.
Given the rest of my career, I do not mean that meanly. I think on this episode, we're not going to go through the entire book because a lot of it is stuff that you've covered on the show before. Mm-hmm. There's a chapter about why the BMI sucks, and there's a chapter about why calories.
So it's basically fat acceptance TikTok in a book. That's what it sounds like.
And calories out sucks. And various other things that we've already covered on the show. So for this episode, we pulled out a couple of the myths that we kind of haven't covered on the show to like dig deeper into them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, I think that, you know, a bunch of the sort of chapters in this book, it's 20 short chapters, are things that our listeners have requested of us a number of times, right?
Yes.
That people have said, okay, I know you made this whole, like, whatever, 3-hour arc about the BMI and the obesity epidemic, but can you give me 5 pages that I can hand to my doctor?
Yeah.
Or can you give me, you know, like a little packet that I can give to my family?
So it's really interesting to me. This little podcast has quite the quote following, and you really don't hear that much about it on YouTube. You really don't.
To tell them why they need to lay off my little brother about his size.
Right.
This is all that. This is the short form. Here's the research. Here's what you need to know. And here's sort of some ways to either fully debunk some of.
I need fat representation. This woman in this video, stock footage, she is not fat. I'm very upset.
These myths, or to add some much needed nuance and complexity and like history to them.
It's the equivalent of like sending your dad a link in the group chat. Be like, I don't have fucking time to explain this to you. Just read Aubrey's book.
I'm done. Here's the BMI stuff.
It occurs to me that we haven't actually said the title of the book yet. The title of the book is You Just Need to Lose Weight and 19 Other Myths About Fat People.
Yes, it sure is. You can pre-order it wherever you get books. You can also find a compilation of links at aubreygordon.net/myths.
Although considering it's your second book, I'm livid that it wasn't called Too Fat, Too Furious.
Humor is very much subjective.
So we have chosen a couple of the specific myths to pull out and unpack. Let's start with the emotional eating myth. This is myth number 9. Fat people.
No, you guys, if I die during filming this, I'm blaming my audience. I specifically, when I listened to the podcast, I was trying to listen to like things that I was never going to put on this channel. So they do like weird political stuff on there. So I was listening to that. I haven't heard a lot of the cringiness of the fat takes. So we're experiencing this together.
Are emotionally damaged and cope by eating their feelings.
Yeah.
This tends to be one of the explanations for fatness that is like one step better than like they're all lazy and that's why they're fat, right? It's like, no. It's not.
It's literally called BED. Just saying. What I will say is that a lot of people think that everybody has that's fat, and that's not true. People come to fatness in 3 ways. They come to it with BED, which I've talked about. I actually have a video about it. That's how I got to it. They come to it through hormonal issues, which I have another video about. If you'd like to listen to that, I did an interview with Lisa where she talked about having PCOS and hypothyroidism at the same time untreated and how that got her to morbid obesity. And there are some people that do make it to fatness, usually just fatness through addiction, which tends to be your people that tend to become obese, but then they usually start to feel these health effects, so they usually start to turn it around. That's a little bit more common, or they at least stop gaining. That can happen a lot too. So that I do have an interview with my friend Eric, and that was him. So there's really those 3 ways that people get to fatness. If you are interested in that, that's the reality of it. Not everybody has the exact same path to getting to fat, but the underlying commonality is that they eat too much. And whether that's just because, oh, I love this food, or, oh, I have hormonal issues, so I'm hungrier, or I don't have enough energy without eating more, or I am emotionally traumatized and I am using it as a coping mechanism for the feeling of the food going down the throat. That's what gets people to be fat. The other thing I would say, what makes people kind of chunky or maybe just puffed out a little bit would be convenience. So a lot of people don't want to cook their food, or they just want to get fast food or something they can stick in the microwave. A lot of those foods are fattening. They tend to have a lot of processed seed oils in them. That's something we talk about a lot on this channel, which does encourage weight gain, as well as other hormonal things like estrogenic foods in them, or like soy, for example, or many other things that do tend to cause people to gain weight. However, those people that are just using it for convenience, they don't tend to overeat drastically, but it is still enough to get kind of puffed out, not have abs, right? Maybe not look your best, maybe have a puffy face, that kind of thing, if you're eating a lot of those foods. So that's typically what it is. Now let's see what they're going to try to say.
That they're lazy. It's that, like, something fucked up happened in their past.
Totally.
So it sort of sounds sympathetic.
Yeah.
But it's like an inch below the surface. It's like, oh, they're all like wretched creatures who are eating because they have to.
Totally.
So I will just say, I know they're trying to act like they're on my side in this, but I don't feel any camaraderie for my experience of BED. Like, hearing this is very disrespectful. I've talked about it many times. Not that you have to be like so respectful of ED, but I do think it does require a little bit of a seriousness to it. You know, I don't know if they would talk about A like this or the other B like this. This is a big joke. Like, it's just hilarious that people have BED. I don't appreciate it, especially from people like them who claim to be so sensitive or really trying not to step on anybody's toes, or that they're so nice. I don't care if they got on this podcast and they just said, I'm a huge bitch, I'm going to say whatever the hell I want, I don't care if I hurt anyone's feelings. That's fine. But it's often these types of people that police what other people say and do to be more inclusive or more tolerant or more nice. They often don't give a rat's ass about people who are overweight, even if they are overweight themselves. So I'm just saying, it's the same issue I had with Taylor Swift when it came to the anti-hero thing. She's always trying to be, I don't want to step on anyone's toes. But she had no issue stepping on fat people's toes, which to me does seem like there is more of a target. Again, you're never going to hear that from me, you guys. I am perfectly fine with being mean. I will say something even if it offends somebody. I don't really care. So it's nothing personal. Like, I'll say it about anything all the time. I told y'all It is what it is, right? But I just think when you try to act like you're so nice to everybody but this one group of people or but this, that's worse than just being kind of mean to everybody if you're going to be mean. I don't know. Maybe that's just a cope of me trying to deal with my meanness, but that's my thoughts. Don't like what you're saying. Don't like how you're making fun of this. It's not really that funny. It's actually really serious.
It's quote unquote better and nicer. But what it
I mean, not that you couldn't make a joke about it, but I don't know. It's just like, I don't know. It's tricky. It's a tricky balance. All I can say is I don't feel a sense of camaraderie with you guys. I don't. I don't feel like you're on my side. I don't at all. I mean, it's a tricky thing. It's tricky. It's really tricky. I think it's probably better to make a joke about it if you've had it. You know, that's kind of what Taylor did, which I appreciated it in the video for the record. She kind of made a joke of her own ED. It doesn't, I don't know. I can see both sides of it, I guess. I get confused when I think about the Taylor Swift thing. Part of me thinks she just did that for like controversy, you know, which it worked because it was so weird. And it's like I could agree with it and disagree with it at the same time. It was very odd. But anyways, point is, don't like the way you guys are talking about it. Especially not within the context of how you're supposed to be, how this podcast is supposed to be. It's a little weird.
is pity.
Right.
Based on your appearance, I can tell you're emotionally broken.
Yeah.
This one, emotional eating, was like a big one in my upbringing in the 80s and 90s. It was like a really sort of prevailing model. It has weirdly come back. It's a big deal on TikTok these days.
Oh.
Sort of the idea that fat is quote unquote like trauma trapped in your body and you need to release the trauma. Mm-hmm. I'm curious.
Okay, that sounds like new age cringe, which I'm not a huge fan of new age. I'm sorry, you guys. Like I said, I'll say things. Doesn't mean that you're not welcome if you are. That's fine. Like, I'm just saying, I'm not a fan of that type of stuff. It's really cringe. It's really awful. I've had people say horrific things to me from a new age perspective in regards to fatness, in regards to my sexuality. Like, they love to try to tell me that my sexuality is a choice and all this type of stuff within the new age circles. Really cringe, really awful. Not a fan of these types of things because it loses reality, and especially biological reality. I like to be grounded in that. So whenever things start to drift off, it can be a bit weird. And that's what that sounds like to me. It sounds like a new age thing, which I agree is cringe. However, if you're trying to act as if it's healthy to be morbidly obese, that's also breaking that's breaking with reality and biological reality, especially, which is why I'm also against them. Two people can be wrong at once. It's hard in this day and age on the internet. People always want you to take a side, but a lot of times both people are wrong or both sides are wrong.
For you, this like emotional eating stuff, have you heard this before? Where have you heard it the most? Are there sort of like common sources of it in your life?
Actually, the main source of it is my mom. One of her main struggles was emotional eating. So for me, that actually became like one of the templates that I used to understand fatness when I was younger. And like my mom was the only person who I had ever heard talk about fatness. So I was like, okay, some people do this. And I've never been an emotional eater, but I'm a bored eater.
So there is such a thing as stress eating. I think a lot of times when people that do not have BED that are emotionally eating, it tends to be that they're stress eating, which means that they are going through something traumatic at the time, or they're going through a period where, let's say you have to work like 14-hour days for 2 weeks or something, and they're eating a lot during that time. That's not technically a binge per se. It's just overeating, which is different. It is a little bit more hormone based. Your stress hormones are running high, therefore your cravings are running high. So that's more in that hormonal aspect, that hormonal pathway that we were talking about. That's not an ED. That's very different. So that's what a lot of people call emotional eating, which I don't think is a good way of describing it. It should be called stress eating. That makes the most sense. And people that are not fat can understand it a lot better, for the record.
When there's nothing else going on and there's something in the fridge, like I will fucking eat it whether I'm hungry or not. And so the idea always sort of felt true to me that there's
The boredom eating, I would say it depends. I think a lot of people call it boredom, like, but at this point in my life, I don't eat when I'm bored. And most of the time when I had my ED, I would eat when bored, when I had a lot of emotional distress, or there was something going on, or I felt really depressed, or there was something else to it that you're just kind of sitting with something. And that's when I would do it. Like today, when I'm bored, I don't eat. I don't ever just eat because I'm bored. It just doesn't even come to me. Boredom is not, I mean, I don't know. It's a little different, I think, when you're a child maybe and you can't like leave your house or you can't do anything. That's a little different. But even then, a lot of times I was emotionally distraught about things. So, yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. I just would ask yourself, like, if you're bored eating, is it really that you're bored, or is it that there is something happening, or that you are upset about something? I would look at that. That's all.
some connection between your mental
Because in my opinion, eating while bored, it can be a bit more ED-ish. So it might be something that people say they're doing, but in reality, they're doing something else. That's all. Because there's no physical drive to eat when bored. There's nothing like that. It depends on how out of control it is. Like, obviously, if you just have like one cookie, it's not a big deal. But if you're eating out of boredom and you're eating like a whole pizza or two-liter bottles of soda and 5 cheeseburgers because you're bored, like, it's obviously something else going on, you know? But other than that, you might just be tired. If it's just a little touch of something, you might just be tired, or you might just be tripping. Again, you might even have a reverse or more of a restrictive side of that, because it shouldn't be that big of a deal if you're having like a little tiny thing. I think people need to question when they eat when they're bored. Just investigate it a little bit within yourself, because are you overly hungry in general? Are you stressed about something, or is this a habit? Is this something that you're consistently doing over weeks and months, and it's a lot? Because that would be more of that BED. So I think it's a way that people deflect a lot. I've heard people deflect by saying, I eat when I'm bored, which is probably what this guy is doing.
state and your eating habits, because I was using 2 people as examples.
Yeah,
so I was
yeah.
like, well, this must be true.
An N of 2. Yeah.
And they're not even the same thing, but 2 people doing different things.
I mean, I think you're touching on something that feels really important here, which is there are lots of reasons that people eat.
Right.
Sometimes you eat because you're hungry. Sometimes you eat because you're at a birthday party and there's cake, and what you do at a birthday party is you eat cake. Sometimes you're bored. Sometimes you're sad. Sometimes you want to feel connected to home if you're far away from home, so you want to eat some comfort food that reminds you of your home.
Yeah.
There are lots of reasons to eat food, and we have decided, because we are so hung up on this idea of people not getting fat, we have decided that only some of those reasons are okay. And
Right.
even the ones that are okay are like a little suspect. Even if you're really, really hungry, you should be really careful about what you eat and how much and blah, 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 right?
Right.
I appreciate you saying it's...
Okay, again, I think that they're kind of deflecting from what people are really talking about. Like, you don't just have a couple cookies and then you're huge. Like, if you're eating a lot because you're bored, that needs to be investigated. Like, it probably is not that you're just bored. It probably is not that you're feeling disconnected from home. It probably is not any of those things. It is something to look at, especially if your waist is expanding, you're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, you need to look at it and at least acknowledge there's a problem going on. That's one thing about weight gain. It does not happen in a day. It happens with consistency, consistent eating, consistent effort towards gaining that weight. Consistent effort and money and everything to gain that weight. It is never an accident. People act like it is, but it isn't. So you need to investigate what is going on. Is it really the food addiction aspect? It could be. You know, is it really just because you like the way food tastes? You know, it's a bit much. If you're getting bigger, like, I do think you have to worry. You have to think about it, you know? And again, like, I understand that people can go too far the other way and kind of get into that restrictive mindset where it's a little too much. But I think, you know, you need to just, people need to learn to chill out about food. Like, since I got over my ED, I don't think about it so much. I hardly ever think about food. I used to think about it every second of every day. And there are still times when I think about, oh, I'm excited to get up tomorrow and eat. But it's because I'm in a deficit. So, like, that can happen sometimes. You can feel slightly hungry at bedtime or just a little bit like, because your body does naturally want maintenance. So that's a little different. But it's not like I'm restricting massively. Anyways, let's continue.
Your mom is sort of a major source of it. I feel like my mom and her friends are also a major source of it for me.
Yeah.
And I think some of this stuff is a little bit generational because one of the biggest champions was the founder of Weight Watchers, Jean Nidetch, who we've talked about on the show a little bit.
Yeah, and you have a great section in your book about her, too.
She essentially said when she was a kid, if she had a fight with one of her friends, or if she couldn't go outside because it was raining, or she didn't get invited to a birthday party, or she was upset with someone in her family, her mother gave her a piece of candy to make her feel better. And she talked about that sort of growing into a broader set of behaviors, like buying Malomars to eat in secret, right?
Sounds like she developed BED, because I bet you it was a lot of them. That's what they're not talking about. It's a lot. It's never just one. You're never going to eat just one chip, just one Hot Pocket, just one scoop of ice cream. That's not what you do. That's not how you get that huge. And it sounds like this person was being honest, and that sounds like a really toxic coping mechanism to be giving to a child. That's toxic. I would never do that. I don't think parents should do that. I don't think anybody should do that. Do not. That is encouraging that type of ED, which it should be taken seriously. But they don't. They don't take it seriously.
Eat sort of in private away from other people.
That's a bad sign. If you are hiding what you're eating, you are slipping into ED behavior, regardless of which one it is. There's a lot of secrecy. I saw a lot of people were comparing EDs to addiction, and it's because there are a lot of overlapping things like secrecy, guilt, shame, you know, like these types of things involved with an ED similar to an addiction. But whenever what you're eating has to become a secret, it's a bad sign. Whenever you're hiding food, you're hiding the fact that you're eating it. Whenever you're doing these kinds of things, it is a sign that there's something wrong. That's not healthy. You shouldn't feel the need to do that. If you do, then something's going on with you. Whether it's, you know, regardless of what it is, I'm just saying, that's when it slips into that.
She was talking about that in the 60s and 70s, which is long before.
And they're acting like it's a big joke. It's not a big joke. What they don't understand is that these things, these EDs will kill you. They are deadly. Depending on how severe it is deadly. But they think it's a big joke. Who cares, right? Because every time with these types of people, they can never acknowledge that you can eat too much. They never are able to acknowledge that.
Or any eating disorders were really in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is the sort of like manual of, mental health disorders as determined by the American Psychiatric Association.
Right. I was really surprised to learn that they were only added to the DSM in 1980.
Yeah, absolutely. And binge eating disorder, which I would say is like some of the behaviors she's describing, that sense of shame around eating, that sense of eating in secret, all of that kind of stuff. This was the most widely available framework at the time when frameworks around eating disorders were not really present, right? Mm-hmm. There was another boost for this sort of framework around emotional eating in the medical world in the 1980s around the Adverse Childhood Experiences study.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about this.
Yeah. Have we talked about the ACE study?
The most detailed description of it I've ever read was in your book. So I'm going to have you explain it.
So basically, there was a doctor named Vincent Felitti who was working for Kaiser Permanente in San Diego in the 1980s. He was running a weight loss clinic for Kaiser Permanente. That clinic used what they called supplemented absolute fasting, which is basically just Optavia or Optifast. It's like one of those diets that is an extremely calorie restricted diet where...
Yeah, that's not good. That's... like I said, there's culpability all across the board with things. This is very toxic to have people just basically not eat, have only liquid diets and all this stuff. It's very toxic. Again, people don't realize there's such a thing as orthorexia. There's other types of restrictive stuff going on. I mean, this stuff is not totally normal. You know what I'm saying? So when you're like, all I can have is this shake, or like if all I can have is juice or something, and I would say all I can have is meat even, these types of things, they slip into other types of EDs. Like, this is not normal. This isn't good for you. So again, there's science doing its thing. It's not always great, you guys. It really isn't.
Starting people on between 400.
And look, they do this so that now these people can speak out against it. I mean, it's just, or like when you do this type of stuff, these people can speak out against it. You give them ammo. Because I agree, it is crazy to have people eat something like that to try to lose weight. That's crazy.
800 calories per day.
Jesus.
Fat.
It's very, very, very low. That's horrible. Very unhealthy. Very bad for your hormones. You will not be able to keep the weight off. It's extremely rare to be able to keep the weight off with that kind of thing. You will lower your metabolism so fast. You will have no muscle. You will burn a lot of muscle and fat as well, but you lose a hell of a lot of muscle when you do something like that, especially because your body will tend to break down your muscle for carbs, especially if you're not working out. It will break down the protein to get glucose out of desperation. It's not good. Not at all good.
Clinic lost a lot of weight in the short term, but shocker, the only stories that I was able to find from people who went to that clinic are stories of people who regained significant amounts of weight.
Right.
So at one point in the 80s, this doctor famously ran into one of his patients and saw that she had regained a real considerable amount of weight in a very short period of time. In a matter of months, she had regained quite a bit of weight. And
we described why, because of the hormonal factors, the hypothyroidism that was caused, the fact that she probably ate a lot of horrible food on top of it all, because when you are in that deeply, deeply hypo state, you crave hyperpalatable foods. You crave foods that are very high in sugar, very high in saturated fat especially, which I don't think there's anything wrong with those things, but when they're in high amounts, you can put on weight, especially if you have a slow metabolism, because they're high in calorie, they're, deeply palatable. That can cause weight gain if you're eating a lot of that. And that wouldn't necessarily be BED. That would be, you're eating a lot of these hyperpalatable foods because you're so depleted, and it causes weight gain. It's terrible.
I sort of asked her what happened. There's not a lot of detail on this conversation. So when I read about it, I'm like, this is probably a terrible conversation for that patient.
Yeah.
Your doctor, who was sort of in charge of your weight loss, sees you and has some expression on his face or says something awful.
And then you've got to explain that, like, oh, right, I wasn't starving myself anymore.
Yeah. I started eating food like a human.
I was eating. So I with these fucking programs, I never.
Which what it should have been is, your diet damaged me. You messed up my body, and so I put the weight back on. That's what should have been said. It shouldn't have been said, oh, because I wasn't starving myself. No, because your study pushed me to harm my body, because you harmed me. In a position of authority, you harmed me. That's why I gained the weight back. That's what should have been said. But that type of thing is not typically said in the United States. In the United States, we all have to bow down and worship doctors all the time, and science and all this crap. Like I said, I'm not against doctors, I'm not against science, but I am skeptical of these things. I am skeptical of pretty much everybody. I have to look at something and see if it's lining up with objective reality or not. And if it isn't, then I'm not going to trust it. If it's not lining up, because people say crazy things all the time. People believe lies all the time. So you have to be really skeptical of these kinds of things. Who else gained the weight back in the study? Is it just one person? Probably not. It was probably almost everybody. It's bunk science. It's a bad doctor. It's a bad scientist. It's an abusive one at that.
No, like, what did you expect to happen? Yeah. Of course, when somebody eats like 1/5 of what you need to live, they lose weight. And of course, when they go back to eating normal amounts of food, they return to their previous size.
Probably gained even more.
Everyone is like, oh, it's just calories in, calories out. Like, oh, it's the second law of motion or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, then what the fuck did you...
It's not. It's also hormonal. We talk about that a lot. Because if your hormones are strong and stuff, you're not going to be able to just eat and eat and eat. You're going to feel too full. Because guess what? Ooh, I messed this up. Guess what? Your hormones are going to kick in, and then you feel full. That's what happens. But you can manipulate your body to not feel full. For example, if you smoke MJ. So there are some cases where you can do something and it can make you able to eat drastically more.
What's going to happen?
Well, so here's the interesting thing. That feels like a pretty good, obvious conclusion to me. That did not feel that way to Dr. Felitti.
It's so weird to me.
He asked this...
Of course, because they always blame the fat person. Which, again, it's usually 50-50. This fat person was probably overeating beforehand. But now there's damage to this fat person's body because of this study. So you see the layers. I'm trying to have you guys see the layers that happen. This experience happens to a lot of fat people where you have the behavior of the fat person for various reasons. Those 3 top ones that we talk about: addiction, hormone issues, so you're eating too much because of hormone problems, and BED. When you look at those 3 factors, that will cause the overweight person, they're eating and eating and eating and eating. But then they go to a doctor who prescribes a failed diet or something toxic like this 800 calorie a day thing, or they do a diet like keto, veganism, carnivore, whatever. They do something like that, and it causes metabolic damage, especially to a huge person who's already metabolically damaged. So when they do something like this, it makes it even worse. And then they tend to be binging after because they're so depleted and their hormones are so damaged. And then it just reinforces itself. And it's like a loop. It's an endless loop, especially within morbid obesity, because by the time you get there, then you have these hormonal issues that keep you there. It's difficult to get out. It is not impossible. I will show you guys it is possible. I am super morbidly obese. I will show you it is possible to get out, but it is very difficult. And I will also show you how difficult it is, which is why you should always prevent it if possible.
Patient, sort of what happened. As they were talking, she said that a coworker had expressed interest in sleeping with her, and that really flipped her out. She disclosed also that she had a long history of childhood sexual abuse. For Dr. Felitti, this was not evidence of like, hey, maybe my clinic is built on a foundation of sand.
Right, like maybe this lady doesn't need to lose weight.
Maybe losing weight is...
So she may have developed BED in regards to that, which... I don't know if they did have as much of a treatment plan or whatever. It sounds like they were just figuring this out at that time, probably because it was the 1980s where there was really any surplus, really. Like before that in the 70s, it was very difficult economically during that time. And then before that, it just kind of was, they didn't have this huge surplus like they did in the 80s and 90s. And etc. and onward when it came to food. So I think you started to see BED be diagnosed and looked into because there was this availability of these foods that were especially processed, highly palatable, etc. So I think that that's really when this was emerging, and I don't know that they had really good treatment options or anything, but it does sound like that is definitely the kind of thing that could lead to somebody having BED. As I told you, it is childhood trauma related. That's really the case with the vast majority of any EDs. It has to do with childhood trauma or something very traumatic early in life that will lead somebody to do that. It's not something that you can just catch like a cold. It isn't like that. It just isn't. It's bigger than that. And it sounds like this person may have definitely had BED with something like that. That could definitely cause it. Absolutely.
The thing.
Maybe that's not what we should focus on.
He took that as, you know what, actually, I haven't taken trauma histories from my patients at my clinic. So he went back to his clinic and took trauma histories.
But do remember where this podcast is right is that not every single fat person is going to have horrific trauma in their childhood or anything like that, because there are those other pathways. So you cannot assume why somebody is fat just by looking at them. You'd have to ask them and then listen to what they say. That's what you'd have to do.
From all of the patients who were there at the time, most of them had experienced major traumas, and for 55% of them, that included histories of childhood sexual abuse.
So that's going to lead to that ED, that type of stuff. Very serious. Very serious.
Prompted him to start work on the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. It is one of the largest scale trauma studies in the United States to date. And the core, the sort of origin story of that study is it's because all these fat people couldn't lose weight. And that's why we need to figure out what's going on with people's trauma. I'm like, boy, oh boy, oh boy. Wouldn't it be great if we found another road to giving a shit about what happened to people?
Right, as kids.
Yeah, that has made them have a bunch of really tricky life experiences.
Again, they do not acknowledge the health issues, the other issues involved with obesity and super morbid obesity. They don't think about any of this. A lot of these doctors, they were looking at ways to fix this issue, especially when they don't have any experience with it. It can be very tricky because people are trying, you have to get these secondhand accounts of obesity from people that are fat, and people are not always honest. They're not. Like I said, one of the main symptoms of BED is hiding that you're eating. So they'll hide and say, I'm not eating anything. Well, that's a lie. You know what I'm saying? So you have to look at it, and it's difficult to talk about, especially because there is a lot of stigma and there is a lot of this stuff regarding the issue of obesity. And people also just often don't want to talk about it in general. It's hard. It's hard to talk about because people don't always know. When I had Lisa on my channel, she talked about she didn't know she had these hormonal problems. So she had no idea why she couldn't lose weight. And so if somebody were to ask her, she wouldn't have known. It's a tough thing. I can understand it from the doctor's perspective as well as the fat person's perspective. It's a really tricky issue. So yes, I do think looking at adverse child events is especially useful when determining BED or when somebody has it. It does correlate. It is real. Whether they laugh about it or not, whether they think it's this huge joke, that's real. That's very real. And I don't want to hear, this just flat out reality denial of this podcast, which again, this is probably going to be a theme on this podcast.
Has made things harder than it needs to be. Like, wouldn't it be great if we could just care about people for the sake of caring about them and not being like, that person looks real fat. How do we make them unfat? Oh, I guess they have some emotion.
It's not about looks. It's also about health outcomes. It's about being able to do things in your life. It's about being able to work more or better, have more, not have to spend so much money on food. So, I mean, when you are obese, it is tough on both ends of the financial spectrum. You have a harder time working and you spend more money. That's disastrous. And then when you look at people dying younger from this type of thing, or you look at people having less quality of life. I've talked a lot about how hypothyroidism, it causes relationship issues with people. You can get aggressive or start fighting with people, or you can feel very despondent and sad and antisocial due to these issues. And they can all be directly linked to your obesity, because a risk factor for hypothyroidism is obesity, because the fat itself is hormonally active and very estrogenic, which opposes your thyroid hormone. This is something that they cannot escape, even if they laugh about it and just say, oh, well, shouldn't we just care about people? Yes, but part of caring about people is helping people lose weight when they need to. That is a part of caring about people. You guys don't care about people. You don't care if they lose weight when they need to. I do. I care more than you. I care about myself. I care about other people like me. I care that people are able to lose the weight when they need to. You don't. Don't act like you're caring. This is the kind of stuff, it's like I want to just backhand, do a bitch slap to the face. Now, we will discount any violence or whatever. I would never do that, but I would want to, because I don't like them saying this kind of stuff and then trying to act like they're the nice ones. You're not nice. You aren't. Stop acting like you're nice. You don't fool me. Not for a second. You might fool other people, but you do not fool me for a second. I see exactly what you're doing. And again, then you're going to sit there and profit off this book so that people can spread your lies. It's crazy. Crazy. This stuff it's evil. This is evil.
Stuff.
All because they don't want to take responsibility. And they don't want to accept reality. They make a joke out of helping other people.
Right?
Yeah.
But also, this sort of extremely anecdotal origin story becomes sort of a real bolster to this idea that fat people are fat because we are emotionally damaged, right?
Do you have a sense of what actually explains such a high percentage of the patients had sexual abuse in their past?
Here's my guess, and this is genuinely a guess. Mm-hmm. For folks who experience childhood abuse, it is much easier to believe that there is something fundamentally wrong with you that you need to fix in order to be accepted by other people. Mm-hmm. And my guess is that includes weight loss, right? Whether or not trauma makes people fat. I would argue there are lots of fat people for lots of reasons, some of whom have experienced major life trauma.
Whoa. Girl. That's harsh. Did you guys hear? Did you just hear what she said? If something happened to you as a child, then you think that something's wrong with you. So that's why you want to lose weight. That's ice cold. That was cold. This is the compassion here. Real compassion. Thanks. Thanks. Wow. Wow, I'm so sorry that we can't all be so enlightened like you. Oh my gosh. Audrey, whatever the hell your name is, I don't even care. Oh my gosh, I just wish I was so smart like you. I'm so sorry that I'm so dumb. Well, I guess who will have the last laugh, you know? The people who survive, they will have the last laugh. This is cold. That was some straight up psycho hypo bullshit right there. That just came out of her mouth. But you know, she's so nice. These people, they're so nice. Wow, that is cold. I'm not even a nice person, and I would never say something like that. Even I have limits. Fuck.
Haven't. Just like thin people. Imagine.
Yeah.
Right? But to tell you the honest truth, I don't know. And I don't know that anybody does.
What's weird is that like this seems like a relatively easy.
Imagine putting people down who have been through childhood trauma because you don't want to accept that you cannot stop eating. Imagine it. Imagine thinking that's a good take. Imagine smelling your own farts after you said that. Wow. All right.
To, I guess, debunk of just like you could do long, like detailed qualitative surveys of fat people and thin.
Zero pushback by the other host. Nothing. Okay. Loving the compassion. Loving it.
People and then compare the percentages. Like it just seems like this explanation is like galloping forward on like pretty thin data.
I think you're right that the data that this one is riding on is very thin. And I think this is a case of the Michael Hobbs checkpoint question of like, what do we not need evidence to believe?
Right.
And we don't need a lot of evidence to believe this one because most of us are already pretty biased against fat people. So if you say that fat person is fat because there's something deeply wrong with them, a lot of people are like, yeah, that checks out.
Yeah.
There are also ways to complicate this one, right? Like if we're talking about like the role of trauma in fat people's experiences.
What I find interesting about a lot of these people is they reinforce people's fat phobic beliefs. They almost give them like a high five for it. It's not like exactly what they're saying, but it's the sort of emotional affect about it that is odd to me. Where it's like, yeah, well, this is why they say it, you know? So then a fat phobic person can be like, well, yeah, this is why. It's just odd. It's like, who are you working for? What are you trying to help? What are you doing? No, what I will say is it's true for some fat people. Like I said, there's those three main paths, and you cannot tell by looking at somebody. Boom. That's an educational statement. That's a statement that helps thin people understand the issues, and it helps create more understanding in general so that this issue can be more dealt with. That's not a fat phobic statement. It's educational. It's effective. That's what you do. That's not what they're doing. Because they're caught up in, well, it's okay to be fat, and let me try to warp reality and deny everything and block everything out so that I don't have to look at the problem. That's what she's doing. Crazy. And it actually ends up reinforcing fat phobia. So people that are fat phobic that are watching this podcast, they are hella reinforced. They see this and they think, oh my gosh, look at this fat logic. Look at this dumb beep. Look at her. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. Yeah. Yeah, and I can tell you as somebody who is fat, look at how ice cold she is, too. I mean, it's bad. This is horrible. Oh my gosh. You guys are not kidding. Jeez.
You gotta be talking about the
You are not kidding about this podcast.
experiences of anti-fatness, which is traumatic as hell.
Right.
If you urge
Yeah, anti-fatness is traumatic, but not childhood blank trauma. That's not traumatic. Not when you compare it to fat phobia. That wouldn't cause any issues. Certainly wouldn't cause any issues with your body. But you know, the fat phobic trauma, that's what we have to worry about. Whoa. Whoa. Crazy.
need medical care and you try
Jeez.
to seek it out and a doctor won't provide it to you or tells you to come back when you've lost weight, that is a pretty traumatic experience. Family rejection on the basis of your body size, starting from really young ages, including forced dieting, is traumatic as hell. We have heard from a number of listeners who, at very young ages, like 5, 6, 7, their parents would place padlocks on the refrigerator or cupboard doors so that they could not access food.
Yeah, that's abuse.
So the idea that there is some trauma outside of anti-fatness that needs tending to, but we...
Parents need to be more chill in general. But again, I do think there is such a thing as, you know, parents, unfortunately, they do pass on their EDs to their children. EDs are learned through, they're often learned through mimicry. That's how I learned mine, you know, so it can happen. And it's not intentional most of the time. These parents and stuff, they're tripping on their kids. They're tripping out. Maybe they're crazy. I don't know. You know, it's like you have to look at it. You have to look at what's going on when it comes to this. I can tell you, you know, I don't have children, so I have to take it with a grain of salt. But one of the best ways that I would think, just from my experience as a child, to help a child not overeat is to lead by example, to eat healthy yourself, to exercise yourself, because children, they mimic that type of thing. And you don't have to put a padlock on the fridge. I think a lot of times those types of parents, they don't want to actually take the steps that are required to make it better. And if your child does have BED, they need to go to a therapist. It needs to be treated. You need to get that issue dealt with. Give a child more coping mechanisms and actually deal with the root of the issue. If it is an addiction standpoint, I've told you guys, whenever people just want to eat because of addiction, you have to get them out there in the world. They have to see. So put your children in sports or put them out in places, you know, take them to see their friends and do stuff so that they can see how their weight is getting in the way. And that will quell that addiction aspect. And then lastly, if there's a hormonal issue, it needs to be treated medically. Or, you know, I take some naturalistic herbs for myself. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for a child, but be wary of that kind of thing. Usually those types of issues don't affect children as much. That's not really a childhood issue. That's more like late teens. That's usually when you'll start to have those hormonal issues, is late teens and 20s. So that's when you yourself are an adult and you can kind of make your own decision. But typically with children, it's that addiction aspect or it's that BED. And those two things, there are different paths of treating that. Padlocking the food in the fridge is not going to help. That's going to make a very, very weird situation. And again, the best case and the best safeguard you have is to lead by example for you yourself to have a healthy relationship with food as a parent. I can just say as a child, I did mimic what my mom did. when it came to food. It's learned. A lot of food behaviors is very cultural. It's learned by family and that kind of stuff. So just be wary of that influence you have on your child. That's what I would say. But they're not offering any advice. They're just saying, oh, those parents are mean and horrible. Wow, look at how awful parents are. Oh my gosh. Moving on.
Definitely don't need to talk about the trauma of anti-fatness is a place where
just say, oh, those parents are so awful and horrible, blah, blah, blah. And you're totally right for eating whatever you want, whenever you want, all the time now because of what your parents did. Literally encouraging people to just dive into their obesity. But they're the nice ones, you guys. They're nice. They're the nice ones.
we culturally really tip our hand, right? We don't really care about the trauma
Oh, and remember, they're oh so smart as well.
part. We care about the fatness part.
Well, there's also this sort of weird instrumentalizing too, because the idea is that, like, okay, they're not fat because they're lazy. They're fat because they're emotionally eating. Fine. So what we need to do is we need to deal with the emotional eating, and then they'll lose all the weight.
Yeah.
But even when people change their eating habits, they oftentimes don't lose that much weight, right? Because their bodies have this kind of higher set point.
What did I tell you? They love that. They love their set point theory. They love it. It's their best friend. So what did we discuss on this channel, you guys? Set point theory is essentially hypothyroidism. So what he's saying here really is some people that are overweight, they have hypothyroidism, and so they struggle to lose weight. So what do? We treat the hypothyroidism. How? We stop eating seed oils. We start going outside in the sun. We start sleeping enough. We start lifting weights. You start eating all the nutrients that you need to get your thyroid hormones in order. And you reduce your estrogen in the environment and in your food. That's what you do. And that all those things will complement. If you do have to take thyroid medication, it does complement it. Because if you eat enough seed oils, it can counteract the effects of your thyroid medication, or it can dampen it down to where it's not as effective. And remember as well, get rid of that fatty liver. Very important for thyroid health. If you have fatty liver, it's very likely you have hypo. And it might not even be that your thyroid isn't producing, it's that your liver isn't converting. There's so many factors that people don't think about when it comes to this, but that's what set point is. I've said that many times, I'll say it many more. It needs to be known. Let's continue.
So what happens then?
Yeah, totally.
Like, there are people that struggle with emotional
You treat the hypo,
eating.
and then they are able to lose.
There are people that sort of get it under control, and they don't become thin people, and that's also fine.
Right.
Yes, be comfortable with less. Be comfortable with having a shorter life, having to take more drugs. Be comfortable with struggling your whole life, because there's nothing wrong with that, especially when it could be prevented or even fixed. It doesn't matter. Just be comfortable in it. Just wallow in it, because we're nice and we want you to settle for less. I'm not going to say that to you. I want you to have a full life. I want you to not have to struggle the way that I have. I want myself to not have to struggle the way that I have. Because I actually care. I actually do think you don't need to settle for that. And I'm not going to encourage you to, because I think that's abusive.
Core problem that this is seeking to solve is that there are too many fat people in the world. So people who opt into this frame as a
So I don't know if that's the way they look at things, but I look more at the individual's life and how it's affected their life. And I want them to be more free. You know, we're not talking about being 10 pounds overweight here. I'm talking about being hefty, you know, being really big. If you're like 300 pounds, that's tough. You know, especially like a 300-pound woman or a 400-pound man, it's tough. You should not have to live that way. You really don't have to. There are ways out, but it's tough to get out. It is tough. And people in general in society need to have patience when it comes to these issues. They take time. They do. It takes a while once you're in it. So the conversations around these issues have to change. But I can assure you, do not change to what they're saying. They are totally wrong.
Worldview, right? I'm not going to take away from anyone their own diagnosis of their own relationship to food or to their own body or whatever. If this resonates with you, totally, that's fine. The trick is this has become our predominant way of viewing fat people. And I would say it is one of the most overtly judgmental myths addressed in this book, right? It is the belief that you are fat, that needs to be fixed, and it's your own fault, right? It's not just that your body is wrong, it's also your brain and heart.
Right. It also doesn't actually do anything for people who are struggling.
That is a very odd interpretation of that whole thing. People don't look at somebody as being emotionally damaged and think it's your fault that you're emotionally damaged. I don't know what that is. That sounds a little new age cringe-ish. Maybe they're a little influenced by that without realizing it. But I don't believe in that type of thing. I don't believe in victim blaming. I don't believe, if you went through something as a child, that it's your fault. It's not your fault if you're damaged, but you do have to work with it and try to get better just for your own quality of life and for you. That's all. Which there are treatment options and there's stuff to do about these issues, whether that's going about it from a psychological perspective, a spiritual or religious perspective, or even healing the body physically. There's a lot of things. I've gotten over so much trauma in my past just from healing my body and getting my hypo better. I'm more able to deal with that stuff. It's like I'm able to process things on a deeper level because my body is better. So even healing your body can help you heal other hurts. I'm not saying that alone. I'm saying it's a very good supplement to healing hurts, because as you get stronger on a physiological level, you can process that trauma easier. You can actually think about things and you don't just seize up, and you can deal with things easier. But yes, psychological, spiritual, religious, or anything, any way to get there, as long as it's healthy and not toxic and not horrible. But that should go without saying. But it's not your fault. But you can rebuild. You can get better. You can do something. And that's what needs to be the narrative. You can rise above it. That's what needs to be what people say about these types of things. Nobody's saying, oh, there's something wrong with you and you're just this and whatever the hell she said. That's crazy. I never hear people say that. I didn't get that response at all when I talked about my BED. People did not say that to me whatsoever. Like, what the hell are they saying? These people, I swear, they project a lot of stuff. They project how they feel, so they judge. They're the kind of people that judge you if you've been through something. That's what it sounds like to me. Because it's like, where is that coming from?
Emotional eating. I mean, this is a framework that really resonates for some people, right? Including my mom. But also, it's like applying it to every single fat person is just so reductive and like...
So that's true. It's not every single fat person.
I'm just going to assume that you were abused as a child because of your size.
Right.
Is like, oh.
It's so reductive and so...
That's not real. But if somebody has BED, then you pretty much can. Because that's where it comes from. But not every fat person has BED. Not even every morbidly obese person has BED. There are other factors. Sometimes when you are just addicted to the food, it can create hormonal issues that will lead to morbid obesity. We talked about that in a Tim Pool reaction video I did, where it showed this 16-year-old girl eating tons and tons of fast food. She could have BED. She could also just be addicted to the fast food. But regardless, those oils will cause those hormone issues, and she has given herself hypo and a fatty liver. I can almost guarantee it just by looking at her. But when you do that, then you can create a hormonal issue, and then you slip into morbid obesity. And once you cross that threshold, it is tougher to get out, although not impossible. It's possible. But it's tougher. It's different.
Gross and also like deeply invasive, right?
Yeah.
Deeply invasive. If you're wrong, it's garbage, right? And you're revealing a bunch of assumptions about that person. If you're right, it is so mean.
It's also garbage.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think, like, look, I think here, this is a place where we get into, like, really tricky territory, because there are people for whom this resonates, and those are also people who learn to see fat people as failed emotional eaters who didn't get it under control, right?
Right.
So, like, even for the people for whom it resonates, it is worth interrogating where that comes from, what it allows you to believe about yourself, and what it allows you to believe about people who are fatter than you.
Like, this is what I honestly think my mom is, like, quite good at.
Yeah,
Partly
yeah.
because she listens to the fucking show. She's like, I've struggled with emotional eating my entire life. Some other people haven't. And, like, some people are fat because of medications, and some people have been fat their whole lives. And, like,
Totally.
some percentage of fat people do struggle with emotional eating, but, like, I have no fucking idea what that percentage is. Don't go around assuming that about fat people.
Totally.
But also, I always try to affirm my mom's, like, explanation for herself, just because it doesn't seem like it's my place to, like,
For sure.
take it away from her, you know?
For sure. I mean, I think, like, listen, what you're talking about is the kind of behavioral stuff that I'm like, that's really useful to check in with yourself and go, right, this is my experience. It's not other people's experience. And reminding yourself of that frequently feels like a really helpful tool for this kind of stuff, right? The trick is most people take this position and treat it as sacrosanct, and therefore think this means my behavior is unassailable because I know what's going on with me.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
To me, that's like a big part of the take home point here is like, for any of this stuff, for a diet, for an exercise practice, for an emotional framework for understanding this stuff, reminding yourself in a really constant way that your own experience could be really different from someone else's, and you've got to create the space for them to speak from their own experience while you speak from yours is really important stuff, and not doing the deeply human thing that most of us do most of the time, which is assuming that the thing that we're doing and the thing that makes sense to us is at the center of other people's world too.
Yeah.
But it's never you, right? It's never her. She could never be doing that. Never. It's always other people who disagree with her, right? Always. Totally makes sense. Makes sense to me.
It is funny to me that, like, at least 1/3 of this show is us just reminding people that, like, what is happening with you and your body is not what is happening for other people and their bodies.
For sure. Well, and also, like, there is an expectation that fat people owe everyone else an explanation for why we are the size that we are.
Ooh, yeah, that's a really good point.
And if your explanation meets muster, which it won't.
Which I've said, a lot of people don't know why. Some people do know why, but some people don't. So I think it's important to increase education on this issue. That's why I'm here. So that people can know why, or people can understand it better, because part of helping the issue is understanding the issue. And a lot of people have never been hugely fat. And how can they know when you don't know? You haven't experienced it. I don't fault you for that. And if you don't have a way to express how you feel, I don't fault you for that either. A lot of fat people, they're not like me. They don't want to say, I feel more hungry. I'll say it. I will say something even if it goes against what's sacrosanct. Even if somebody's going to tell me, yeah, you're hungry. You'll never wilt away like that, or whatever the hell somebody wants to say. I don't care, because I'm the kind of person where I just do not care about what other people think. I will say what is real. I will say, this is what it is. This is it. And to use their terminology, I will create space for other fat people to be able to say that. Like when Lisa was on my channel and she's telling me, yeah, I was so much hungrier when my hormonal issues were untreated. And yes, they would be, because of physiological, like she would be more hungry because of physiological reasons that often have to do with insulin resistance, especially with PCOS, but also with hypothyroidism. They both have an effect on insulin, which directly correlates to hunger. So yes, she's right. She was hungrier. People don't know this in the public. And that's what I'm saying. I do agree with them that, yes, you have to look at, what's happening in your body. It could be different than somebody else's body. Absolutely. And again, somebody's experiences with how they got fat could be different from somebody else's. Like I said, that's why I tell you guys it's those three main groups. Those are the three people that tend to, the three types of people that tend to get big. That's what it is most of the time. That'd be the vast majority of the time. But what we can do is we can make correlations or even some generalizations about being in a certain physical state, like being super morbidly obese. There are going to be things that are highly correlated, like fatty liver. It's extremely correlated. Things like depression, extremely correlated. Certain things like that. Just like we can make some generalizations about certain things that all women experience, like their monthly cycle, for example. Maybe not every single woman experiences that, right? Maybe, but most women have experienced it in their life or will experience it in their life. That's still a generalization you can make. So one woman can assume something about another woman. Oh, I can tell that she's probably pregnant because this happened to me. And they're right a lot of the time because they have experience with it. It's not this black and white thing. And it's ironic to me that she's trying to act like she's so nuanced and she's seeing the world of gray. But her way of painting this is actually very black and white. It is very black and white to say you can never make any generalizations about morbidly obese or super morbidly obese people. That is untrue. That's ridiculous. Let's continue.
Then I'll leave you alone, right? Like that's sort of the cultural script here. And for thin folks, when they're asked for an explanation of their body, it's always, what's your secret? How did you do it?
Yeah, God.
I don't know, man. It's a grim fucking place to live where even the people who think they're doing you a favor want you to explain why you look the way you do.
Dude, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move us on to I don't like gaining weight, but I don't treat fat people differently because it feels like we're already sort of there. And then I'm going to take us back to glorifying obesity to close on. Is that okay?
Transition us. Do a deft transition.
Leave that in. The part-
Oh my God, we're going to the Taylor Swift one. That's the next one. Let's see. Let's see if I agree or disagree. Again, my views on that, I'm not sure, but I'm sure they're gonna have some things to say that will probably change my mind about certain things. Let's see. Or maybe I'll go in the exact opposite direction of them. You never know. You never know, because I think for myself. Let's see what they say about this. The Taylor Swift myth of fatness.
Get us there somehow.
So we've been talking about sort of this idea of emotional eating and the frameworks that we use for ourselves. And I think there is sort of a kingpin version of this. There's like the mega version of this, which is the phrase, I don't like gaining weight, but I don't treat fat people differently.
Right.
Is this a phrase that you've heard before?
I've mostly heard it from you. This is like your biggest pet peeve.
I hate it.
I feel like so much of the show is like me subtweeting specific people and you subtweeting specific people.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is one... Like, this must be one that you have heard from actual people numerous times.
I have definitely had multiple friendships in my life where I realize partway through that I am actually a project to the person that I'm talking to.
Oh.
Yeah, dude. People will
Ew. Okay, that is cringe. If that's true, that's pretty cringe.
try and slyly sneak in things like, do you ever think about going to the gym?
Oh my God, my friend does that to me all the time. The thing is, though, is that when it comes to like female friendships or like people who are more feminine, that kind of stuff works. If you do that to like a guy or like a manly man, it doesn't work. They don't listen. But if you harp enough on a girl, she'll end up listening after a while. That's what I did with my mom. I just harped on her about the PUFA. I just kept harping and harping and harping and harping and harping. And she's not like perfect or anything, but she did stop like most of it. And it has helped her. She didn't have to She's been able to get off of some medications. She hasn't had to do certain medical treatments that we thought she was going to have to do because she got off of this. So it's like sometimes it can work as long as you're not telling somebody don't eat any carbs and don't eat and, just starve yourself and go to the gym for 10 hours a day. Like, no, my friend harping on me, it did get me to go to the gym. Maybe that's why she's upset about it, because it works.
They are viewing me as like a fixer-upper. Like I'm a house they can flip.
Right.
And that makes them feel like
Ew, that's a weird way to look at it. No, I think it's just like care and like wanting you to be healthier. I don't know if that's like you're a fixer-upper. Because I don't know like if your friends are that invested in you. Like friendships aren't that like, it's not like they're your spouse or like your mom or something. Like it's different. It's not as heavy of a relationship when you're just friends. So I don't think she's interpreting it right.
good person who's doing something good for a person
right,
who they fundamentally see as like kind of wretched. Do you know what I mean? Like
right.
a hard luck case. Almost all of the people who have
Okay, that's a lot of assumption. You're assuming a lot of what other people are thinking. I didn't know she was a mind reader. This is fascinating, isn't it? So not only is she the most intelligent person, the most empathetic person, but she's so intelligent and empathetic that she can literally read people's minds. Isn't that crazy? Wow.
been that person in my life would say with a great deal of certainty that they treat fat people no differently than thin people.
Now I just feel sad, like I want to give you a hug, but we're not going to see.
So I have a lot of friends that don't treat fat people any different. They just don't. Like there's plenty of people that don't. They don't think about it. They might think about it in terms of dating, but that's a little different. Again, you have more of an investment in that type of relationship, but friendship wise, no. And like for me personally, I don't really like, except for I do acknowledge it as an issue. And I will have concern, just like I have concern for myself. Like, that doesn't mean that I'm bigoted towards myself because I'm fat, because I think about it as an issue. But I think it's a lot more common for people to not care as much about like platonic relationships when it comes to fatness and stuff. But again, in general, people are just not that friendly at this point. So I don't know. It's weird. It's a weird thing to say. I've had plenty of friends that don't treat fat people different. Plenty. So, I mean, you can find them. You can find them.
City.
The part of this one that I really want to push on is the...
Now, I will say I don't know if that was Taylor Swift. I think she does treat people differently because they're fat. That's my personal belief. I don't have proof, but that's what I personally believe. I don't know if she feels that way anymore, but I know she at least did. That's what I will say. So would I be friends with Taylor Swift? No, I wouldn't. Even if I like her music, I would not. Because she would probably treat me differently for a lot of reasons. One of them because I'm fat.
I don't treat fat people differently part.
Yeah.
If you don't want to be a fat person.
Now that's me being a mind reader. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm just saying that's just what I believe. I don't have proof. Don't come for me. That's an assumption. Blah, 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 blah. It's just certain things I've observed. But whatever. Let's go on.
Worth unpacking how much of that is socially determined, right? And how much of that is a result of how fat people are treated.
Yeah.
If you don't like gaining weight, why? If you say it's because your clothes fit better, what if people made clothes that fit?
Look, I'm a toxic Swiftie, okay? I love to hate Taylor and I hate to love her. It's just a weird thing with me. You're just gonna have to get used to it, especially because she was involved in the fatness debate, which I kind of love her for that. I kind of do. kind of everything. Let's continue.
at a different size, right?
Yeah.
Or you feel more accepted, or you feel you're going to have better career success. Why do you think a thinner person would have better career success than a fat person, right?
Maybe because they have more energy and they can actually work. I don't know. Isn't that like a crazy novel concept? Gosh, almost like they're maybe actually healthier, so they can actually do more, actually get things done. Who knows, right?
It's worth looking at the ways in which
Not to say that fat people are lazy, but it definitely does damper down your production. You know, a lot of times when people get promoted and stuff, they have to work very long hours, or they have to have multiple jobs, or they have to do a lot of stuff outside of work on top of everything else. And it can be tough for somebody who's morbidly obese to do all those things. It just is. Let's be honest.
is baked into some of those assumptions as well. But I'm not going to get between you and your relationship to your own body and your own size. That's you stuff. You get to manage it.
I do feel like, I mean, we live in a fucking wildly fat phobic society. So the idea that somebody would be like, you know, whatever, I'm a corporate lawyer. To be a corporate lawyer in America in 2022, I have to stay thin. Part of me feels like, okay, like that's fucking true. Like the sort of the fundamental challenge of living in America right now is like, how do you live within a like super broken and unjust country? Like, what do you do about it?
As compared to what? China? Russia? Brazil? Where's the super just country compared to the US? Am I supposed to look at like Sweden for that? Because there's a lot of problems there. Am I supposed to look like, where am I supposed to look for this utopian society? Is Atlantis around? You guys seen it? In the ocean? Because I don't know what they're talking about. I'm not going to say there aren't problems here. There definitely are. But when it comes to the fatness issue, oh, hun, you're not going to find better than here. You really aren't. Go ahead and try to go to like South Korea. See how it is. I mean, you got to be kidding me.
Totally.
Right?
Like, I have had a number of people who have had weight loss surgery or gone.
Cry me a river of the, oh, I'm a victim for being in America. You can leave. Unlike other countries like North Korea, you can actually leave if you want. If there is this utopian Atlantis, you can go there. But you won't because you're lying. They lie. It's a lie.
Through major
That should be another cope. That's another cope is I'm fat because America is the worst place ever. No. I will say there are a lot of issues here. There's issues everywhere. There's nothing wrong with trying to improve the country. I think there's a lot of environmental factors, you know, pollution, that kind of stuff that we do need to focus more on. I think the environmental conversation is hugely drowned out by global whatever, warming, cooling, whatever. Climate change, I think it's a huge waste of time. I think it's a distraction from the real issues, which would be things like smog that we're breathing in, plastic on our food, chemicals on our, you know, the pesticides and stuff that they are using are very toxic. That's the stuff we should be talking about, but instead we just talk about climate change every day and fight about it back and forth, and it's a huge waste of time. But that doesn't mean that those issues aren't real in the United States. However, in the United States, you do have an option to get organic. You can live out on a homestead if you want. Like, you can still create your life, even with all the problems it's currently having. So, again, I'm not seeing that much freedom in places like China. So, I just think little weird to just say it's an issue that I have to be thin, quote unquote, have to, which when it comes to something like being a lawyer, people care about what you are able to do. They're not always, you know, being a lawyer is not being a supermodel. It's not exactly the same. Like, you could just suck at your job. And that's why people don't want you. So, and if a company is that dumb that they're going to hire a lawyer based on how they look, that company is not very sound. So that's a little cringe to me. Just saying. That was super cringy. But let's go ahead and continue.
Who have said, I went to pick up my kid from school and other kids were making fun of him for having a fat mom, and I'm not going to do that to my kid. Or, my boss told me that he doesn't think I can physically do this job unless I prove to him that I can physically do that job. And for him, that means me being thinner.
Yeah.
I'm going to go do that thing, right? Like, now at least we're talking about some kind of concrete external thing.
Right.
And you can go, hey, those kids shouldn't have been making fun of your kid for having a fat mom.
Yeah.
Like, can I support you in this moment, right? Like that.
The thing is kids will make fun of other kids for anything. If it wasn't that, it'd be something else. It's like whack-a-mole. But again, they don't care. They just care about the fat thing. They don't care about anything else. They'll pick on a kid for having a nose that's too big, pick on a kid for having glasses, pick on a kid for their mom is this way instead, or their dad is like this, or, I mean, it could be anything. It would be something else then. It's just like, okay. Again, a lot of these people, they have this utopian vision that will never come true. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, you guys.
For a different thing than just being like, I'm just talking about me and I just don't like gaining weight and just leave me alone.
Right.
But listen, the part of this that I want to talk about is the I don't treat fat people differently part.
Yeah.
Because in my own experience with this stuff, and also according to quite a bit of data, most of us are bad judges of our own biases. Most of us want to think of ourselves as...
Does that include your bias of what you're about to say? Because again, she does this a lot where she tries to just throw it all out there, you know, and it's like, well, you're a person too. So does that mean that what you're saying here, we shouldn't trust it? That's how I'm taking it. I guess I shouldn't listen to what you're saying because you're just biased. According to your own logic, you may have no idea the depths of your bias. That may be true. You may have a complete lack of self-awareness. I don't know. Either that or you're just totally lying. But either one isn't really a good option, is it?
Egalitarians, as justice-minded, as fair people, you know? And the idea that we might be acting in a biased way feels like not only...
The thing is that a lot of people really don't care. There's a huge... I know it might shock her. It might shock her, but there's a lot of people that do not care if somebody's fat. There are a lot of people that do care, but there are also a lot of people, and probably even more, that don't actually care. The people who care the most about if somebody's fat or not tend to be people who are fat or people who used to be fat. Those are the two categories where they will often care. Myself included, I will be honest. I've paid attention to people who have gained weight and stuff, but it's because it's something that you've experienced. So it's very different. But a lot of people who have never been fat ever, they will not think about it as much, you know? But sure, are there times when I talk to Eric about how Lana Del Rey goes up and down all the time? Yes, I do. But again, she's doing that thing where we sometimes, like she said, people that do experience that or that do that themselves, they project it onto everybody else. I don't. I know so many of you guys that have always been thin do not think about it ever. You never think about it. I completely understand that. And maybe you do think about it. I don't know. But a lot of people don't care. A lot of people don't. And if you tell somebody who never cared about it that they do and that they don't know their own brain and stuff, it's like, well, maybe you don't know their brain. Like, maybe you haven't experienced not being fat, so you don't remember, or you can't relate anymore because you've been fat for so long. I could understand that, but I have the ability to put myself in somebody else's shoes and be like, okay, look, I never dealt with this. I probably wouldn't think about it. And a lot of people say they don't think about it. So they say, oh, I don't really think about it. They don't act like they think about it. Blah, 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 blah. I have to say it checks out.
Revisiting of that action, right? But
the people who tend to care are people that are fat themselves, used to be fat, or have some kind of an ED. Including Miss Tay Tay. So she does. But is that all her fault? Maybe not. Maybe not, right? Because EDs come from somewhere. They do. I don't know if we'll ever know where it came from for her, but it's not really our business, is it? You know, if somebody doesn't want to share, they don't have to. But I'm just going to say it probably isn't just the industry. There's probably more to it. But I do believe that she had it. But yeah, that's why I do think she cared about if people were fat or not.
Feels like potentially an assault on our idea of who we are, right? Like, I wouldn't do that. A bad person does that, and I'm a good person. Good people don't have biases, right?
Yeah.
And what that means is any kind of feedback about this stuff then gets pushed through the filter of, are you calling me a bad person?
Right.
Rather than, you're giving me feedback on an action. What can I take from that feedback, and what do I want to do different?
Because people don't just accept things with zero pushback, zero criticism, zero skepticism. And I will tell you guys, it is not healthy to do so. I think it's good, even like with what I'm saying, it's good to be skeptical of what I'm saying. It's good to look at it. It's good to look at what I'm saying and think about it in terms of your experiences, the data points that you have, and just kind of compare and contrast different beliefs and all this stuff. I will not hate you if you don't agree with me. I'm not going to. That doesn't mean that I'm going to change my mind, though. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to stop saying these things just because you don't agree with it. But I don't hate you for not agreeing with me. That's fine. I think it's fine to be skeptical. I think you should be more skeptical of everybody. Not just me, but everybody. Because the issue keeps getting worse. So we have to start having a critical lens, to use their language, about the issue of obesity. If it keeps getting worse, then we haven't found the answer, or we're not doing it right. Clearly, this type of rhetoric that is in this podcast is not helping at all. This is probably a huge part of what's causing it to get worse, for sure. It's definitely one of the things that is escalating it.
Or not next time, right?
Well, to me, the weirdest thing about this is the confidence.
Yeah, totally.
Like, I host a podcast pretty substantially dedicated to this issue. I do not go around telling people, like, I don't treat fat people any differently. That's not really for me to say. I can say that I try. I can say that I think about this issue a lot. I can say that I talk to my fat friends. I check in. But, like, part of living in a structurally unjust society feels like it requires the acknowledgement that, like, yeah, there's probably some weird toxic shit rattling around in my brain.
Yeah.
And, like, walking around as if, you know, everyone in society is bad, but not me, just seems like the kind of attitude that is going to make you incapable of addressing that stuff when it does come up.
And
that's how both of them are, though. They do view everything, the problem is all of society and it's everybody else, and you're fine. You guys are enlightened. That's how they both are. That was one thing I noticed about the podcast. They're very into how enlightened they are. They love the smell of their own farts. Both of them do. They think they're the smartest people in the room. They're the most wonderful, most kind, most educated, blah, blah, blah. When all I'm hearing is he's saying that he doesn't think about anything from a skeptical place. He just accepts whatever she says about fatness, he will accept it with zero thought. That's not smart. That's actually dumb. That is dumb. What a learnable moment for us. Let's continue.
there is some research that is like specific to this question, right? That seems worth digging into. There's a 2014 study in the journal Body Image that looked at white women who participated in this practice that they call body surveillance, which is essentially like close monitoring of the appearance of your own body.
Okay.
And what they found was that those white women who engaged in body surveillance, who were hyper-focused on the look of their own body, who held anti-fat stereotypes, who held anti-fat beliefs, experienced less body dissatisfaction in themselves. They were literally looking at fat people and going, I feel better because I'm not that fat.
So it's just like self-soothing by being around people bigger than you and be like, at least I'm not like her.
Absolutely.
Ew, God.
This is all.
I definitely think that was Taylor. That's just my personal bias. That's an opinion. I can't prove it, but I 100% believe that. I do. Absolutely. But even Taylor, like, her mom is fat and she loves her mom. So, I mean, you can hold multiple views at once. I don't know. It's like, I get that it's toxic to do that, but people tend to do that. I don't think it's good. I think it does come from a bad place to compare yourself to other people and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so much better than them. I think I've had a lot of people do that to me. Not necessarily about the fatness issue, but I had a lot of mental health problems when I was younger, and there was just a lot going on with me where, you know, some of my friends, I think they did feel like they could compare themselves to me and it made them feel better about themselves. But that is toxic. But that doesn't mean that they didn't like me or that they didn't care about me. Like, people can hold conflicting, weird beliefs all in their head at once. It's very complex, but we all know this as people. People are weird. We are all weird. I feel that way about Taylor Swift. I love Taylor Swift, but I also am so irritated by her a lot of the time. Like, you know, I have mixed feelings, and that's normal. But at the end of the day, I still listen to her music. I still enjoy her as a person. I would be horrified if she wasn't doing anything anymore. You know what I mean? And that's how people, they don't understand that. So again, I can't judge Taylor if she has these weird beliefs about fat people, which I think she does. But regardless if she does or not, I have weird beliefs about her. So I'm not going to judge her. People have mixed feelings. It's natural. That doesn't mean you hate somebody. It just means, oh, I love this person, but they irritate me. Especially in our personal lives, especially within our families, especially with our significant others, or I'm guessing our children. I don't have kids, but I bet parents can have mixed feelings about their kids. I would say probably that's normal. But apparently, if there's fat people around, you have to just be 100% on board with everything all the time. And that never happens. So again, we have divorce from reality.
Coming from emotionally like a pretty similar wellspring, right? Of just like, when I look at people who are fatter than me, I feel better about myself. And the idea that you could then look at that person with such revulsion, disgust, maybe some pity, and then treat them identically to a person who you view as being part of the beauty standard.
So does this person, does she honestly view everything as 100% black and white? So she either absolutely loves somebody, she puts them on a pedestal, they can do nothing wrong, they're the most amazing person ever, or they're this evil, excuse me, I just burped, this evil, horrible person who must be condemned and all this stuff. Because that's what she's describing. She is the psycho fan, or she's the psycho hater of everybody, if this is true. Me? No, I have mixed feelings. I have mixed feelings about everybody, I'm sure. I think most of us do. That's normal. I don't think she... Okay. All right. You might want to get some of these things looked at. So that's a little odd. It's not the healthiest way to think about people, to be 100% black and white with people. It's not healthy. It can make you act crazy.
We're kidding ourselves.
Yeah.
It's not borne out by the data. It's not borne out by what we know about people and how they work.
Yeah.
And it's also highly unlikely because most of us treat fat people differently. Fat people get paid less for the same jobs. We don't get the same health care that thin people get, right? Like, we aren't believed in, like...
Huge citation needed. Huge. I'm not going to just accept that. I worked in fast food. I got paid the same as a new hire. But what I will say is I had a harder time holding down a job. So I often was a new person at a job more often.
Very baseline ways when we come forward with stories about, you know, sexual assault, because the response is no one would want to sexually assault you.
Yeah.
So when someone says, that's everybody else, but not me.
That's harsh. Somebody says that. That's really nasty.
Right.
Feels like really self-protective thinking to me rather than let's solve the problem of anti-fatness kind of thinking.
This is one that we have to dig into because one of the main accusations of this show and of like fat activists writ large is this thing that always comes up that is like fat activists think it's fat phobic to work out. They think it's fat phobic to lose weight. This is something.
Yes, that's so true.
This is like one of the main arguments that is used to discredit.
They say it's fat phobic to have intentional weight loss, but they also say it's impossible. There's a lot of confliction within the movement. It's very odd. But it tends to happen when things aren't based on reality.
People who are trying to build a better world for fat people.
This one I have encountered way less than you have.
Oh God, people will not shut the fuck up about this to me.
But listen, you live on like Reply Guy Twitter. You know what I mean?
How dare you? You're absolutely correct.
I have studiously walled myself off from Reply
Very unlikable.
Guys. I'm like,
yeah.
Most of the fat activists that I know are deep believers in body sovereignty, right? Which is the idea that your own body is yours above all else, and it is your decision how you want to interact with that body. Period. So
then why do they constantly comment on other people's bodies or on how other people talk about things, about their bodies? They're always policing people's speech. They're policing what people post. They hate it if you post a weight loss before and after transformation picture. That's not body sovereignty. They hate it if you say you want to lose weight. They hate it all. They hate it. They hate it, especially if you do lose weight. Why do they comment on celebrities' bodies then? Why do they comment on Rebel Wilson? Why do they comment on Adele? They say, oh, well, I don't like the way that they talked about it after. Well, but they're allowed to talk about their body because body sovereignty would mean they're allowed to talk about it however they want. Does that mean that people also are allowed to hate their body? Are they allowed to hate their body if they're fat? That's body sovereignty. It's your rules, not mine. I'll comment on somebody's body if I feel like it. I'll comment on my body if I feel like it. I'll do what I want.
when someone says they all think it's fat phobic to lose weight, that is shadow boxing with a made up idea in their own brains.
It's not made up at all. But in their false reality where they live in delusion land, yes. But there are literal videos on my channel of people talking about how you don't want them to lose weight and all this stuff. There are literal thousands of TikToks about this thing. You could look it up. You could find it. There's so many people reacting to this. I mean, it is crazy to say that never happens. That is crazy.
Right.
Or more likely, hearing a thin person go, I heard they think it's fat phobic to look, you know what I mean? Like,
no, they literally will play the clips of the person saying it. You can literally hear it in a fat activist's mouth. And then they just repeat what they just heard. Unless if you're trying to say that fat acceptance TikTokers don't speak English properly, or they don't know how words are interpreted as well as other people, then you have to concede that they do say this. That would be a very fringe argument, by the way. It would be really weird.
It's like a game of telephone with no source code.
That's really crazy. So I think we're seeing how they think this way because they just delete everything out of their brain that they don't want to see.
Totally.
Peak simulacra. Totally. A copy with no master.
I think it's like this fear among members of the majority, kind of like how people freak out about like word choice. Like, you can't even say this anymore.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking about how acceptance would affect members of the minority, they think about how acceptance would affect members of the majority, right? And if we're nicer to fat people, I'm not going to be able to go to the gym anymore.
We're going to have to be meaner. But also,
there are so many TikToks about people saying going to the gym is fat phobic. There are so many of them. And again, you can't say it's all one way or all the other because they do contradict each other. Not every fat activist is going to believe the exact same things. On my channel, I tend to talk about the trends of things that they do tend to say all the time, like losing weight is racist, or set point theory, which they mentioned in this video. So I'm just saying this, there are trends where they pretty much all say that. But yes, some of them are good with going to the gym and some of them are bad with going to the gym. It depends. But there is a huge amount of them that can't stand people who used to be fat and have really strong issues and speak out very loudly against celebrities for losing weight. And they'll often say, well, it's their body. It's okay that they lost weight. I don't care about that. I care about how they talked about it. I care about how they do this with their body. I care about how they felt about their body. I care about this. I care about that. It's like, well, then you care. Don't say you don't care then. You're lying straight to our faces. You're lying to yourself. You do care.
I think it's deeper than that. Like, related, but like, I'm going to take it, like, if we're getting in an elevator, we're going down a level or two, which is they are afraid that people will stop thinking of their bodies as an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Quite a bit of this body image research includes...
That's never going to happen. That would be a really weird way to look at it, but also, too, how many fat activists do you know that are with thin partners or partners that are in shape? I know quite a few. Quite a few. People lie all the time about what they're attracted to. Trust me, as a gay person, we know that all too well. But straight people lie too about what they're attracted to. It's very common. And that goes for men and women. That's all across the board. People lie all the time about that kind of stuff. But the reality is, people will see it as an accomplishment because it is one. If you have to work out, if you do things to get your body to be a certain way, you will see it as an accomplishment. I mean, some people see it as an accomplishment to gain weight. But that's within a certain community of people that we're not going to say on here because YouTube will be upset. But regardless, depends on what people are into. And when it comes to like society and this kind of stuff, in general, people see weight loss as an accomplishment, not for the attractiveness factor, but for the health factor. Wow, look at you. You can go up a flight of stairs now without being tired. Look at you. You are able to relate to people easier, or you're able to look nicer in the clothing that you buy, or just whatever. It's more of these neutral things on a societal standpoint. Wow, you're not so inhibited. Wow, you don't seem like you have labored breathing anymore. I'm so happy for you. What an accomplishment that you lost that weight. But people don't see somebody who was always thin and think, oh, well, their body is an accomplishment. No. They think of an accomplishment as somebody who's has six-pack abs and huge muscles, or, you know, like a banging booty or whatever, right? Like people that go to the gym for hours and dedicate to actually get that physique. That's what people view as an accomplishment. They don't view just being thin as an accomplishment unless if you lost weight. which takes effort and dedication and all these things. That's not going to change just because you don't like it. Just because you don't like any kind of merit, any kind of effort, you don't like people getting rewarded for their hard work at all, I'm sure. I'm sure these people have views about like money and, you know, taxation and all this stuff. That's probably crazy as well. But of course, their money's fine, right? They're fine. Never applies to them, but let's continue.
Sort of this idea that thin people feel like they need space to like speak negatively about their own bodies and talk about how fat they feel. And overwhelmingly in that research, when fat people are included, they overwhelmingly return to this one phrase, which is, shit, if you're fat, then what do you think of me?
Right.
So I think it's also worth like thinking about this stuff through that lens of like.
Yes, but it's a two-part thing. So for me, whenever a friend tells me something like that, I don't internalize it because I don't care. I know that that's like a crazy thing to say, but I don't care how they feel about their body. Unless if they're like really hating it or like harming themselves or something like that, I don't actually care if they're having a bad day. It just is like water blown out of the water. That doesn't make any sense, but whatever. Just let's pretend that was an expression. It's getting late. It doesn't matter to me. I think they're saying something about their body. They're not saying something about mine. But if I asked, I'm like, oh, do you think I look hugely fat? They probably would say yes if they were honest to me. You know, but I'm not asking their opinion because I feel like I'm hugely fat. So it's like, yeah, I can look at them and be like, yeah, you do look a little fat today. If they do, or no, you don't. Just like I look at myself in the mirror and I go, oh my gosh, I have moon face today. Or, ooh, I look really bloated. I mean, I'm not as tripped up about it. So I think you don't have to take it so personally as a fat person. Like, you really don't. People are more focused on themselves, just like you're more focused on yourself. Just like you hear somebody comment about their body and you think it's you. Well, people don't, they're thinking about their own bodies most of the time. Now, again, if it does go to a certain level and it turns into like an ED and stuff, then there is oftentimes they do judge other people's bodies and you have like fat spo and these kind of things, which those are very real. So again, when you get into ED territory, all bets are off. Okay.
Whether you mean to or not, the social introduction of this set of conversations about how you're trying to make your body smaller at every turn sends a lot of messages to a lot of people. And that constitutes treating fat people differently.
Do you remember, like, me and you have done a number of press interviews together where people will, like, almost explicitly ask us for permission to be, like, trying to lose weight? It's fascinating.
We've done a number of interviews like this. There's one in particular where afterwards I remember it with sort of chilling clarity.
We were both like, that felt weird.
It felt so bad. And after the interview, I just like put my head down on my desk.
Yeah.
And just like laid it there for a while. And then I got the little like notification that you were calling and you were like, what the fuck was that? And I was like, I don't know.
It was fascinating.
It was so rough. But it comes up like a lot, right?
Yeah.
Which is sort of this belief that if we're going to talk about the dignity of fat people, someone's going to tell you at some point that your desire to lose weight is messed up and anti-fat and actually you can't do that anymore, right?
Yeah.
Is one of the first places that some folks' brain goes is like, don't take my diet from me.
It's like, you're going to tell me I can't do CrossFit anymore.
Totally.
I will also say neither one of us gives any shits whatsoever whether you do CrossFit.
Totally. So, Michael, I would like to talk to you about a phrase that is the bane of my internet existence.
Is it retweet if you agree? You hate that. I know you hate that.
Should we talk a little bit about glorifying obesity?
Yes, the glory. Let's talk about the glory.
Glorifying obesity is one of those things that shows up largely in internet comments, right? That's sort of where it lives the most in my own experience. And there is one year where glorifying obesity had a real banner year, and that was 2019. There were three big splashes on the internet, all distinct from one another, all of which sort of culminated in this big crescendo of accusations of some fat person glorifying obesity.
Yeah.
And it was usually for things like being photographed in a place.
Right. There was one of the examples in your book is Lizzo appearing on the Jumbotron at like a Lakers game or something.
Yep.
She wasn't glorifying or promoting literally anything. She went to sports.
She was glorifying and promoting the Lakers.
Yeah.
But like, listen, this is also one that will be recognizable to any fat person with any social media presence, right?
Okay, so when it comes to this, loving the any, because I've never gotten a comment that I'm glorifying obesity. It may happen at some point. It's never happened to me whatsoever. I don't know if it's happened to Lisa. I could ask her. I don't think it has. We're two fat creators where that doesn't happen. So clearly, there's something else going on. What I would consider glorifying obesity is acting as if there's no health issues with it, acting as if it's completely fine, acting as if it's a good thing. That would be glorifying obesity, which you do see that a lot with fat acceptance TikTok. I don't do any of those things. Lisa doesn't do any of those things. Therefore, we're not glorifying obesity. Now, if Lizzo is just existing, I do think people throw that accusation out all the time, and it's overplayed, but people overplay a lot of things. So that's just something people do online. They will just say something over and over again, and it can be overly generalized. So I do agree with that. Like a fat person just sitting and taking a picture of them at a coffee shop or something, that's not glorifying obesity. But if they are getting on camera and being like, I'm so happy and healthy for being fat, this is amazing, I think everybody should be fat, blah, 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 or there's nothing wrong with being fat, I'm completely fine, like all these kind of things, which is typically within the fat acceptance TikTok space. That's the most likely place you're going to find stuff like that. That is glorifying obesity.
If you have ever
It's because you're not being honest about it.
posted a picture of yourself as a fat person, eating a meal, going to the beach, working out, wearing clothes, liking the way that you look,
right,
there's a decent chance that either you have been accused of glorifying obesity or you're a strong candidate to be accused of glorifying obesity, right? It's usually a pretty incurious, freaked out.
Some of this is a result of the fat acceptance rhetoric as well. But a lot of people that do get these comments, they do have pages where they do glorify obesity on other aspects of their content. But that can sometimes bleed into other people that have nothing to do with it, because they actually create more bigotry against fat people with how they talk about things. They're more alienating. They're causing more problems. There's becoming less acceptance of fat people the longer they go. And like I said, people that are fat phobic, it does give them fuel. A lot of this rhetoric, and they watch these kinds of videos. They watch these podcasts. They watch TikTok videos to hate on fat people. That does happen. It definitely does. Let's keep it 100.
An angry place.
Let me read your live journal story.
Okay.
This is something that you included in this chapter. Actually, do you want to do it?
Sure. If you have the paragraph handy, if you have the excerpt that you want to...
Let me text it to you.
Sure.
It's funny to be texting you a paragraph of yourself.
It's really
so
weird.
On the
We're
show.
in very weird territory. As a fat person, I have repeatedly been accused of glorifying obesity, even before my life as a minor public figure. Early on in my life on the internet, I posted a picture of myself in a new bathing suit on LiveJournal. I was 18 years old and had found a swimsuit I liked. It had a halter with a sweetheart neckline and a short ruched skirt. Compared to my thinner peers' bikinis, my one piece was conservative, bordering on dowdy. But for once, I felt comfortable. I took my photograph in the full-length mirror in my dimly lit bathroom, then posted it to LiveJournal. My account was public not because of any desire for attention, but because it did not occur to me that a teenager with under 100 followers would draw detractors. But in the days that followed, faceless commenters descended. One described in detail their revulsion at having to see my thighs and upper arms. Another commented scornfully about how a whale could think she looked cute. But most elevated their complaints to social issues, accusing me of glorifying obesity. I was confused. It was confusing. I was a recent high school graduate, writing regularly about my life, my crushes, school, my mental health. The only people who reliably read what I wrote were close friends. How could I be glorifying anything?
So, first of all, I need the LiveJournal archives. So I want to read your fan fiction.
Dude,
I want your thoughts.
I think it was like 2 days ago that I've had the same Gmail account since time immemorial for my personal stuff. And I got...
Okay, so I don't know about all that, but I would say, like I said, my definition of glorifying obesity would be lying about it, saying it's a great thing when it isn't, saying you're perfectly healthy, or acting as if it's something to aspire to be. That would be glorifying obesity. So maybe they felt that way with posting a picture like that and posting it up. Maybe people felt as if you were acting as if it's something to aspire to be. That's their interpretation of it. I don't know if that's where she was going with. It depends on the caption and everything else. But if somebody's just living their life, you gotta leave people alone.
An email from LiveJournal that was like, "It's your anniversary," and there was like big multicolored letters being like 20.
Oh,
it's
that's
been
adorable.
20 years since you started your goddamn LiveJournal.
What happened to it after? I imagine this made you start like posting differently, or just like it's like the first experience of realizing that you're like public on this platform and that like the public is watching.
Yeah, I mean, I just locked my account after that, and
oh really?
Yeah, I put it on private, and I think on LiveJournal it's called friends only. Thank you.
It should have been friend zone.
Like I don't know how long it was before I posted another picture, but it was a long time.
To me, this is like the whole thing where it's like what people are getting mad at. They're mad at having to see a fat person who's not like apologizing to them for the way that they look. But like people's brains don't let.
Like I said, there's a lot of the other rhetoric going on in terms of obesity. It's not just about somebody not feeling terrible about how they look. That's crazy. That's cringe. It's a very like reductionistic way of looking at people. I think you need to look at the captions and stuff. You know, if the caption is like, being fat is amazing and anybody who ever made me feel bad about it is stupid, and I think it's perfectly fine to be fat and everybody should be fat, or you don't even have to say everybody should be fat. You should just be like, I love being fat. Being fat makes me happy. Being fat is the best part of my life. That's glorifying obesity. That would be glorifying obesity. Literal textbook definition. But just posting a picture of yourself with nothing, no, but you have to look at the overall context today. I don't know about 20 years ago, but today, that's what it is. You know, it's the entire cultural conversation around it. It's really, really deteriorated.
And realize what's going on, right? They're like, no, it doesn't bother me that somebody else looks a way that I don't approve of. It's like, no, this is her motivation. This is what she's trying to do. Or like, this is the impact that she's going to have on the world. And the whole thing is basically just like reaching for any reason for you to justify your really gross emotional response.
Yeah, it's totally an emotional response. And it is an emotional response that gets elevated to a level of like, this needs to be a societal concern.
That's literally what they do all the time. Do they not realize how much they project?
And it elevates a picture of like a fat person at a pizza parlor into some level of like political agenda.
Right.
Even
that's what they do all the time.
If that fat person is not espousing any political agenda at all, right?
Right.
It's the fact of.
They do that all the time.
A photograph of a fat person who's not like inside a Weight Watchers meeting center or running around a track and crying, I guess, right? Like, I don't know what. It also feels like really weird on a couple of fronts. One, nobody really defines at any point what it means to glorify
Okay, well, I have.
obesity, right? It is this total floating signifier that sounds really damning, and people can just reach up into the ether and grab it and pull it down and apply it to whatever they want, slap that on whatever they want.
Need I say, I don't get comments on it. Even like, I used to do different kinds of content that had nothing to do with this. I still wouldn't get those comments. I would just get people calling me fat or something. I never was told I was glorifying obesity. Like, that's something they're doing. It is. Like, you don't just get told that. There's usually a reason.
Glorifying something means publicly praising it.
Right.
Yes, which a lot of people do that. I see it all the time on fat acceptance TikTok. They do it all the time. They talk about how amazing it is. That's glorifying it. Which it isn't good because it isn't healthy. It'd be like glorifying addiction. Glorifying a lot of things that are unhealthy. You know?
Fucking love if we publicly praised some fat people some more.
They do a lot.
I think there is this little like Rube Goldberg machine that kicks off in the brains of people who have this level of discomfort, which is if there are images of fat.
Okay, I wonder if they're talking about themselves. I just remember when they canceled that poster that was like, "Are you Beachbody ready?" And it was somebody in shape.
People not actively trying to lose weight or suffering in the world, then people who are not currently fat will think it's okay to get fat and will start getting fat.
Right.
And people who are fat will never get thin as a result of this one photograph on Instagram.
I guess the idea is that like the reason fatness became more prominent in the 1980s is that like there started to be photos of fat people and we glorified it too much.
Michael, the 80s is when we got Dom DeLuise.
Bob Hoskins.
That's what did it.
This is also why I always feel a little bit weird about debunking the health stuff on this podcast, because it's so obvious that the health stuff is a cover for people's feelings, right? Because even if it was 100% true, every single fat person is unhealthy. Fine. Everyone, regardless of their health status, gets to post a photo on Instagram and be like, I felt cute.
Yeah.
Everyone gets to do that without people being ghouls in their mentions.
And also, like, listen, then let's ask the underlying question, which is, I'm sorry, you think it's okay to treat people like garbage if you think they're not healthy?
Right.
You just gonna go around bullying people with chronic illnesses and disability? Like, that's your stance? Like, it's
Yeah, that's not a good stance, but people do tend to feel that way, which is bad. You need to be more solution-oriented.
that I'm doing this because I think this person is unwell in some way. Like, Jesus Christmas, get a hold of yourself.
The funny thing is, like, the best counter argument to this is all of the ways that society does, in fact, glorify thinness.
Yeah, totally. I mean, listen, this goes back to our, like, no one should be drawing any conclusions about anyone else's health based on the way that they look.
Yeah.
And no one should be basing their treatment of strangers on their perception of that stranger's health, right? Period. That includes people of all sizes. That includes people of all abilities. That includes, like, across the board. I mean, I think the other thing that I would say about all of this is, like, spot the fuck on about us glorifying thinness all the time. We got an email from a listener at one point who was like, I'm a very thin person. I'm constantly trying to gain fat, and there is, like, not any real resource around that. Other than just, like, you know, the extremely weird actor interviews that are like, to gain weight for this role, I just melted a pint of ice cream and chugged it or whatever, right?
She should be going on Instagram and looking at photos of happy fat people, because that just induces fatness in others. Obviously.
Surprise, you're fat now.
Thermo.
It's the same as anything else. Somebody who's thin that doesn't understand how to gain weight, it's the same as anything else. If you want to gain fat, you just eat a lot of seed oils and you'd eat a lot of calories. You'll get there. Have a lot of fried food. If you want to gain muscle, then you just have to up your calories. You have to eat more meat and you have to eat in a surplus. It's not rocket science. People tend to struggle sometimes with eating more, maybe because they don't have as much of an appetite, but there's a lot less mysticism around that issue. That's why people don't talk about it as much, whereas there is this sort of mysticism around being fat, where people act like it's impossible to lose weight, or, like they say weird things about it. There's so much emotional charge, like in discourse around the issue, which there can be when it comes to gaining weight, but it's typically very different conversations and it's more private for some reason. And maybe you could talk about it more, but most of the time that people have asked me, I don't know how to gain weight, I just say you have to eat more. And they don't want to, so then they don't. It's the same as somebody who has to eat less to lose weight, right? I mean, if you want to get hugely huge, eat a bunch of fried food and go to McDonald's. That's how you gain a lot of weight. Don't eat the ice cream. Eat fries from McDonald's. Get those oils flowing through you and you will put weight on. It's very simple. If you want to add fat, muscle, it's a little trickier, but I would just say combine carbs and protein and, eat it after a workout and do all this stuff. Like there's plenty of fitness people that talk about how to gain muscle. So it's just, there isn't as much mysticism around it. It's not as foggy. That's why it's not talked about as much, but there's plenty of resources to look at that.
Nuclear, just I'm fat again. I looked at 2 photos. I clicked the heart and now I'm fat.
I mean, I don't ever anymore say anything to people who make accusations about
Total straw man, by the way. Just had to throw that out there.
Glorifying obesity because they're telling me who they are.
Speaking of people who are not worth our time, who we're going to be spending time with.
Boy, what a fucking segue.
You have a section in your book about Piers Morgan. Mm-hmm. I guess there was a music video that it includes a shot.
Okay. I can't handle the Piers Morgan drama. I think we're good to go now. But that was definitely illuminating, for sure. I'm sorry this video was so long. Let me know, you guys, if it's too long, because if it is, then maybe if I revisit this, I can split it into 2 parts. I probably would have to, honestly, because the rest of them are really long. But I probably will do those as well, like a couple of them at least. But I'll have to do it in separate parts because it takes a long time to react to it. But also a long time to watch. So I think if I do that, I'll just split it, one day, then the next day, and do it that way. But this was definitely illuminating. This is really, really weird. There is one that I am absolutely going to do after this, but I did enjoy this in the sense of being able to fight against this. It's interesting to hear them talk about it long form. And I will just say, these people, they honestly think they are the smartest people in the entire world. They're the smartest, they're the most empathetic, they're the kindest, they're the best. They never have bias compared to other people. You guys are all biased. You're all dealing with your emotions. They have perfect emotional control, clearly. But this is what I was seeing when I listened to them on my own, when they were talking about other issues. But it's pretty cringe-tastic. So let me know if you guys liked this. If you do, we will definitely revisit. I think I will probably revisit it at least one more time. But let me know if you like it. We can do this. This can be a thing for a while. It can be a fling if you like it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave your comments below, please. I will see you guys soon. Have a good rest of your day, night, whatever. See you soon. Bye.